My guest today is Luke Angus, an award winning filmmaker and a seasoned 3D animator known for his emotionally rich storytelling and visually striking work in animation. He has collaborated with leading studios, including Nickelodeon and Framestore, and his work spans both commercial and independent projects with a focus on narrative driven short films. Now, in 2021, Luke received the Best Animated Short Film Award at the Short Film Awards for his acclaimed sci fi short, Alienated. Now, his current animated short, the BAFTA longlisted SOLSTICE, a poignant meditation on grief and isolation set in the Arctic Circle. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker and animator Luke Angus and his award winning animated short, Solstice, to the show. Welcome, Luke.
Wow. Thank you so much for that introduction. We should just cut it there. You should pay people to just that service. That was so nice. Thank you so much for that.
You are very welcome. And I have to say, Luke, you created one of, if not the most beautiful animated short films in 2025. I mean, the story, the music score, and of course the animation is just simply spectacular, beautiful, and somewhat triumphant. So, where did the story of Solstice come from? And for the audience, what is the story about?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you. Yeah. So where the story came from is a tricky one. It's one of those projects where I had the ending. I already had the ending. However, that came to me, I don't really know. It was just one of those ideas that seemed to arrive in my brain. That an igloo could essentially, in a very fun, charming, childlike wonder kind of way, could be in place of a planetarium. If you were to poke holes in an igloo, you could almost imagine that looking. You've got this dome structure that exists in a part of the world that often doesn't get the stars for months at a time in the Arctic Circle. And I thought the marriage of those two ideas, being this ice snow planetarium like structure in a part of the world that might not get the stars for certain months at a time, I was like, that is such a perfect ending to a film, is to have the character think of this idea to poke holes in an igloo and then almost recreate the night sky inside the igloo. And so then I just worked backwards from there. Like, why does he need to recreate the night sky inside his igloo? And then it very naturally all just sort of worked backwards from that point as to finding the motivation for the character that he had lost someone. And so to sum up, Solstice is in its plot. It's about an Inuit man who's just recently lost his partner, and he has to wait for the winter to return before he can be reunited with her. And yeah, that's the sort of base premise. Very spoilery and all a lot of this, but it's okay.
But why did you want to explore grief, isolation, devotion, and even emotional perseverance in this short film?
They were just themes that quite naturally arrive when you're in these settings of the Arctic ice sheets, and it's very you've got this very powerful image of a sort of very small igloo along this vast sheet of ice, and it's such a powerful story mechanic. Isolation and loneliness, it's something most people can relate to in some way or another. And and it all just branched back from that ending idea of this film, and then it just very naturally falling into a rhythm of the drive would be for companionship in this sort of environment. It shares themes with my previous film, Alienated, which was a little alien on a planet completely by himself. Again, it lended itself for these themes. And I tend to fall into this. I just think it's such a universal. People can relate to that. It's not too niche that it's people can't quite get on board, and they can somehow find their own story within that. And and again, these settings. And I'll be honest, a lot of it comes from being a solo. I'm a solo filmmaker. I made this film completely by myself over about 4 years. Some of it is practical. Some of it is just I don't have the budget to have 10 characters in the film, and so I think whether I'm doing that without realizing it or not, my stories tend to be limited settings, limited characters, limited. I think it is because I know I'm going to make it by myself, and it's my own filter system to make sure I'm able to do something that I can start, something that I can finish realistically to a certain standard, where I'm putting a lot more of my time into the quality rather than quantity of whatever it is, characters or sets. And I almost don't realize I'm doing it. Is my point. I tend to come up with these stories, and I think that's why. I think that's a more recent realization I've had as to why I keep landing on these themes. But yeah, it seems to work very well, and I seem to yeah.
Well, I
Keep doing
want to
it.
talk a bit more about the emotional perseverance, because you have a character who is in his habitat that must rely on nature for food, shelter, and even fire. And every time he must go get more wood to build a fire, he will constantly be reminded of that fateful day. So, only a change of environment or time can help lessen the loss and the pain of losing one's other half. And you portray that element with such grace.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a there's something I really want to do in this film, which was to sort of flip the narrative on the head of maybe what you might expect to be if you were a character living in, let's say, 6 months of summer daylight and 6 months of darkness. You might expect the sun returning to be what they're looking forward to, what they is the sort of triumphant return of the sun. Finally, everything's good again. And I love the idea of celebrating the sort of night sky, celebrating the stars, celebrating that side of things, to be like his summer months are his lonely months, when his partner in the stars leaves him, and he's just left to live life without her. And that being this celebrates the countdown to winter, to being what he's waiting for. I really like that idea, and I grew up in rural Scotland, where I'm aware of what the night sky can look like in a rural setting, and a lot of people don't experience that. They'll grow up in a city, or they don't get that chance to go and drive out to the countryside and look at the stars. You can imagine it just seeing this blank, boring blackness above you. But if you see what a canvas it can be, it was another inspiration for the film, was thinking of the stars when they are that endless in these rural settings. It is just a canvas. You can imagine anything on the backdrop of the stars. And as to what you're saying about the perseverance and having this summer, having to navigate through the summer, a big part of that was also just to reinforce his tragedy and his story, which was that he lost her during the summer. He lost her in that environment. It was due to thinning ice and ice melts, and so it was almost something else he was holding against the summer as to why he was resentful almost to that aspect of his routine and his existence and his environment. Winter being his safe space and his yeah.
I was surprised with the scene during the night solstice that you had his other half's image float by under the ice, but really that was the reflection from the sky.
Yeah, I had a nice scene where I wanted to think of a way where they could almost be together, um, almost physically, and I have him lying next to what is essentially his fishing hole. So a hole in the ice that he's cut, and you've got this reflective water surface, and she's in the stars. So as he sort of lies next to this hole, she's like reflected next to him. And that was a common theme throughout this, where I again found this very natural story point where, because the Arctic sheet is this often flat plane of, it's just ice, you got this opportunity to from the right perspective stand on the ice, and then the backdrop of the stars almost looks like you're standing next to someone who could be in the stars. And it was just if that was a very hilly mountainous region, you wouldn't be able to have this like almost like a salt plain effect where you could have someone standing far away or on the horizon. And again, that lent itself so nicely. So I've got these two characters almost interacting with each other, but she's in the backdrop in the stars, and he's standing there. And so I was always trying to think of these little story moments where I could have them look like they're reunited, look like they're together again. And the one you're mentioning was, that was a nice way of sort of another idea I had of just sort of almost like they're lying together, like they may have what they did at the start. We have this flashback to what they used to do together, and then they do lie on the snow together. So it was a nice way to just sort of mirror that, but now that he's lost her.
I'm not sure how to actually put it into words, but I loved how you created the emotional longing of never wanting to forget someone we lost, because the main character kept a constant spirit of hope, which I absolutely loved. And even in the small somber parts, you manage to keep our hearts full of love and joy, and that memories are the places in which we can go back to for comfort. And the ending, no matter how many times I watched it, every single time it brought tears to my eyes, but I would say joyful tears to my eyes.
That's good. Yeah, yeah. The ending was, like I said, it was the starting point. So it was a really fun way to write, where everything was in service of that ending. I knew I had the ending there, so everything I was writing before it, I could almost cheat it, not cheat it, but it's like a magic trick. You're just sort of laying these pieces in that will all help that ending hit, and arrive at that moment with the biggest triumph and the biggest, like, yeah. But it's interesting because if the themes of the film being sort of grief and dealing with grief and loss and how you can try and move on or not move on, and the ending is almost quite tragic in a way, where he's essentially not moving on from this loss. He's like trapping himself in this world, and it's portrayed as this big celebratory moment, as the ending is. But when you actually sort of, let's let it sit and think about what's actually happening, it's not very, almost what you might call healthy from a sort of therapeutic point of view, to not be moving on from this partner, to be locking yourself away from the world, to do just be existing with your memories. But I really like this gray area where it felt just more almost, maybe a lot more um, relatable, maybe, that people's experience, it's not always this perfect, like, oh, I moved on, I lost someone, or whatever your experience was in your life, and you just moved on, you were able to put it behind you perfectly and find someone else that was all great. Like, most people's experience is not that nice and neat, tied up little bow. It's complicated, and you maybe aren't able to let someone go. And in this, the sort of metaphor of this film being that, like, he doesn't let her go, he lives with her, and he continues to live with her, and there's a beauty in that as well, and that's nice. But yeah, it's a funny ending to be like, it's a little bit tragic, but yeah,
Yeah, it
maybe not
is,
always the
but
worst.
I'm looking at the main character living in an environment in which
Sure.
he is very used to being by himself, or when he had his partner, there was only the two of them. And yeah, it is a somewhat tragic ending, but for him to truly move on is a bit difficult being in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did love how he was able to, well, turn day into night and,
Hmm.
extend, his memory of his partner that much
Yeah.
longer. And, but I just found the ending beautiful, even if it did have a little bit of tragedy mixed
Yeah.
in with it.
Yeah, because it's the tragic element really. If anyone hasn't seen the film, they would probably be surprised when I'm talking about the ending being tragic. Like, it really is sold as this, like, amazing, triumphant, celebratory moment, and it is only when you really reflectively think back on the film and what the sort of meaning and messages could be. But it's definitely not in that moment when you are at that ending point. My intention is, this is a celebration. This is an amazing, like, achievement that he's figured this out, and he's got this perfect solution where he can be with her all year round. It's like lovely. But yeah, it was more once you sort of dive deeper and start thinking about it. It really unearthed some really interesting conversations and thoughts about that, and how we're dealing with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine the different types of conversations. And
Hmm.
I've watched this film so many times, and
Thank you.
I loved how you used the characters to represent the solstice, the living for the day, the one lost as the day can't live without the night, and the night can't live without the day. So
Yep.
again, it was such beautiful storytelling, and the way that you just really played off the meaning of the solstice with two people. And see, even when I watch live action shorts, I love it
Mhm.
when there are a minimum cast of characters. To me,
Yeah.
1 to 3 characters is the max for a short film because you're focused on the story. You can do so much
Sure.
with so little, and you did it with this film. Now, why did you choose to use no dialogue and then let one of the most incredibly beautiful music scores I have ever heard become the voice of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a writing point of view, I've always really enjoyed the challenge of writing a story that you can, I suppose, limiting my palette of my craft with taking away the dialogue. Is your story strong enough that it can stand on its own, and with just visual mediums and with clever tricks. I mean, it's done before. Pixar famously, their short films are what I consider to be the pioneers of short form storytelling and animation without any dialogue. And the stories, they have no limits on the story they can tell. If there's anyone who thinks your story has to be somewhat limited because there's no dialogue, that, I mean, if Pixar have anything to prove, that's not true. And I've always just really enjoyed the challenge, first of all, but I also just think there's something like human going on when you're watching a film without dialogue, that your brain has to just work a little bit harder to piece the puzzle together. And I think we enjoy that experience. Again, at like a human level, I think we enjoy that experience of having to work a little bit harder to like draw out the film, draw out the story, rather than just someone on the screen is talking to someone else, explaining what's happening, etc. And I do think there's something there that's a bit more interesting to watch, that you feel a bit more rewarded, maybe, that you figured it out because, and no one told you anything, and you followed this. Almost quite surprising that you can follow this story despite there being no dialogue and no exposition. Or so that's one element. I really enjoy that writing challenge. And then as for the music, yeah, I mean, so I can't take credit for the music. It was basically a long process of finding artists on whose work I just loved, and it felt like the right tone for the film, with the themes I was trying to portray in each of the acts of the film, and the difference in the sort of day and night, sort of winter, summer, reunion versus loss. And my approach was essentially, I found three artists, each of whom I loved their music, but they shared characteristics in their styles, but they each had their own voice. And then I essentially licensed a few of their tracks, and I mixed their music together, basically, to weave them in and out of each of these acts. So while I didn't write the music or didn't write the score, I was responsible for sort of mixing it all together and sourcing each of these three different artists that represent the three different sort of acts of the film. Yeah.
You know, one of the ones it was the music "Little Things" by
It's lovely.
Adrian Beringer, and I noticed it right off, and I'm like, that,
Yeah.
because that was going back to the film projector. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you were mimicking 8 millimeter or 16, but when that
Yeah.
music hits, I mean, it's pure joy
Mhm.
when you hear it. And
Yeah.
then I kept thinking about it. I was like, okay, if the song is called Little Things, it kind of reminded me that it's the little moments in life can be the most
Yeah.
memorable.
Well, I actually knew that song already before, and I had it in my sort of list of, that's a very strong contender for what I will use in these. I always love when there's like a motif in short films or in films, when you've got like, that's their motif. That song, when it's playing, is them together, and it's so joyous and happy and perfect. But it's also so powerful as a tool that it's also in the moment when tragedy strikes. You just take this track away, and you're left with the silence and the, some ice crack. It's just like, it really does create the most impactful moment when you've got this beautiful, very whimsical, charming, quite simple piano melody, and yeah, then when that is juxtaposed against the most tragic moment in the film, and you just cut it, and then you're left with this like emptiness. And yeah, but it's a beautiful piece of music. He's a fantastic composer. There's a few others from his works that I was looking at for that same I did, but the little things was for, again, I'm a sucker for the name of the piece is somewhat reflected in it has a bias. I have a bias towards those. Yeah.
No, I mean, even the ending, I kept replaying I would back the ending up by 30 seconds, and I would just keep watching it over, because the way that the film ends, where you get this climax, this triumphant hit of the music score, and then the word "SOLSTICE" comes up on screen. I kept looking at it. I mean, of course, you get tears in your eyes even by watching the last 30 seconds of the film. And I was like, it had the very, very ending was like watching a very powerful movie trailer. Because the moment Solstice hit,
Yeah, you get that
you're
title
wanting
punch.
more.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to watch the movie? Okay, let's play the movie. Yeah, yeah, I know. I've actually taken that inspiration from a few films I've watched where a friend of mine, Ross Snedden, very talented filmmaker, it's actually from his film Many Moons. He had the same formula where he almost treated the title reveal of the end of the film as the big climax. You reach your story point, the point your story has been building up towards this reunion moment with the two characters. Your payoff isn't them reuniting, isn't them running at each other, hugging. Your payoff is just the moment they know they are reunited. And then you cut on that, and you use the title, that punch of the title, being like, you don't need to say anymore. That is, what's happening, and you fill in the rest in your head as well. Like you could. Another big inspiration is the end of Monsters Inc. I don't know how well you know that, but the ending of that, it's you can imagine it's a big reunion moment, very similar to this, where Sully, he thought he's lost the kid forever, and at the end he's gifted her door he can open the door, and you're waiting for this big reunion. You're waiting for the door to open. Sully runs in and give a big hug and have a big moment, and they just open the door, and you stay on Sully, and you just hear off camera her saying his Kitty, as she calls him. You just hear Kitty off camera, then it cuts, and that's the ending. That to me, I think when I was very young, when I watched it, I was quite disappointed, if I'm honest. I was waiting for that, what you think is coming, the big reunion. But then as I've watched it, and as I've got older and watched that back, I'm like, the genius of that ending, to not do the tempting, the obvious, and just all you needed is her off camera, and knowing they're reunited, and leaving them there. Cut to black, and you almost like let them have their reunion. So anyway, I love that energy, that type of ending where you just see the smile on in Solstice. You see him turn, big smile on his face. He sees her. They're united, and you just cut. And you don't need to linger. You don't need to stay on them.
Yeah,
I knew that was,
you don't need to add to that story. It's
yeah.
what he was trying to accomplish with the igloo, and the moment it hit, that's all we needed. And it was so funny
Yeah.
that you bring up Monster Inc. because I want to know more about the creation of the animation, because when I'm looking at the hoodie part of his parka and you're seeing all of this
Yes.
fur moving with him or
That's
moving
amazing.
because of the wind, when I saw that, I paused it and I went, I have not seen animation this good since Sully's fur.
Oh wow. Yeah. 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 Thank you. It's a big praise from
Well,
Pixar at the top of the game.
yeah, and
Yeah.
this, back in the day when film studios were working with 3D animation, they spent more time
Mm-hmm.
perfecting and making things as real as possible. Now, a lot of the animation in the films today look a bit rushed.
Yeah, yeah. I think the fur on the hood. I don't know why. There's another one of this. I could almost explain it like the ending just arriving in my head and thinking that's a great ending, but struggling to know where that came from. Same with for some reason this character design. I just had it in my head. I'd seen reference images of Inuit cultures where the art they've just they're kitted out in fur, and you can imagine living in those environments. But I love the um, power of having this huge, almost like target, this huge hood, and just a very emotive face poking through, and that's where all the story is sold, is on this little, very expressive face. But the fur hood, the big, silly, exaggerated fur hood, it was just something I thought had so much charm and so much like a little bit silly. It's a little bit like, but it's memorable and it's somewhat different. You never maybe not seen that before, and I loved all that those aspects of it. But the actual technical side of things was one of the bigger challenges of the film. It was using a piece of software that I had actually never used before, and I was quite intimidated by it. It's quite a sort of known software in the industry I work in. It's called Houdini, and it's sort of known as being the very complicated but very powerful. Whether you're doing like fur or hair or water simulation or fire effects, it's the software you go to for all that. Um, all that good stuff. Anyway, so I had never used it, but I knew in the back of my mind, it's like, I need to, if I'm going to do this, if the fur is almost like, it's like the charm of this character, it's front and center the whole way. So it needs to hold up. And yeah, I think the only way I could do it was with this piece of software. And yeah, it took a lot of learning, and I'm so happy with
So
the
how
result of
how
it.
were you able to make so many strands of fur around his
Yeah, so from
face? Because
a
that's a
technical point of
lot
view,
of
what you
work.
yeah, you're sort of, you can think of it like the computer does all the heavy lifting of. mm, so you almost like guide a limited number of hairs somewhat manually. You're controlling a limited number with certain parameters, and then the computer will take those few you've done and sort of extrapolate and fill in the gaps with how the rest of the fur. You're always controlling like the wind strength or the turbulence of the wind or the length of the fur in different parts of the hood and the rigidity of the fur, and all these, you've got like every parameter you can imagine you're controlling. But then it's at the end of all that, you sort of run it, and then you'll see how does it. So it's like a little bit of maths and a little bit of art is a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Well, you know, the details of this animation in this film is so stunning, but how long did it take you to get I mean, let's say just the fur alone on the parka to move with his movements in the wind, how long did it take you?
Yeah, I mean, I went through so many iterations. I used different software. I think I was trying to avoid this big scary one for a long time, and I wasn't finding the right look, and I just kept on trying different solutions. But it was maybe about a 6 month research and development phase of that. I would keep coming back to it, and I would convince myself it was nice, I liked it, and then I would leave it for a while, come back, like, no, it's not it. That's not quite right. And maybe over about 6 months, to get the first, is the shot of him coming out the igloo for the first time. He ducks and lifts his head into frame. That's the first shot where that was my test shot. That I was running different hair and fur simulations to get it to work, and it was that one that I've got a graveyard of shots of that same with different types of fur and different. I've got maybe 25 different versions of that until I got the look I wanted. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to create the film from conception to completion?
It was about 4 years, but it was 4 years of spare time. So it was 4 years of like early mornings, a bit of time after work. I work full time at an animation studio, so it's early mornings after work, maybe some weekend time, but then also taking a few months off every so often if life stuff would happen and wouldn't have any spare time for whatever reason. So while I say 4 years, if I was to work full time on this 9 to 5, I think maybe you're thinking about a year and a half. I've maybe estimated something like that, maybe a year to a year and a half. But hard to say though. It's really difficult to. It's just lots of a few hours here and there added up over 4 years, and it's hard even me to believe. When I looked at my earliest files and I saw it was 4 years ago, I was like, have I been working on this for that long? You just slowly chip away at it, and I never really look at the end, and I just keep going, and yeah,
Well, one of the
realize how much time
details,
passed.
Luke, one of the details that I loved, and most people may not even notice this, and most people may not even care. One of the details that I really loved about this film is how you took the cinematography, and there would be where it's like it's like you're taking a film camera
Mm.
and you're working with focus. You see the clear distance. You see
Yeah,
the close-ups being blurry. I mean, how does one create that in animation? Because it makes it look like somebody sitting there with a camera
yeah,
saying
yeah. Uh,
action
um,
and
uh,
cut.
yeah, that's a great. I mean, I love that feedback because it's very intentional. That thing I'm doing, which is maybe always feeling like someone is operating a camera rather than it. There is no camera. Obviously, it's digital, and it's like I can just point where I want the thing to. But there is an art form to me in it. It's funny, and I always think in like live action. To an extent, they're always trying to hide the fact that there's a camera. They're always trying to like any camera shake. They're trying to stabilize. They're trying to like perfect the digital image and trying to take away the human behind the camera. Whereas I think there's a charm in animation to sort of add the human in the camera back in and make it feel like someone's operating it. And there's lots of little tricks to do with what you're saying. Like if you're if a character's moving and the camera follows them, you think of it as like, as that character starts to move, don't follow them straight away, because you're a person reacting to an actor moving. Give it a half a second delay and then start following them. Or if you're trying to catch focus on something, and you might miss for 5 frames and come back again, and so it's things that our humans are doing, but it's those little imperfections you feed back into you're trying to make your digital CGI animation kind of feel a bit more human. And there's lots of little tricks like that which I have very intentionally added in, so it's nice to hear that feedback, that it feels like someone's operating the camera. I don't know for what reason we kind of instinctively like that. Maybe it's sort of me feeling like it's more human, but yeah.
I mean, I noticed it. I loved it. I loved the panning shots of going in and out of the igloo. I loved the panning shot when he went to go get more firewood. He's in the forest, and I'm literally looking at that one scene in the forest, looking at the snow on the ground, looking at the trees, and I'm like, this almost looks lifelike.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a funny balance to get. You've got this big sort of silly cartoon character essentially that he doesn't look lifelike. I mean, some part maybe do. The fur is quite realistic, but it's striking that balance. I think that goes back to Pixar again, maybe specifically Toy Story and what their recent films. They've somehow managed to strike this very clever balance of things looking almost photorealistic, lifelike, but they've got these very cartoony, not realistic looking toys and characters in them. So yeah, I think there's probably some unintentional inspiration there from Pixar's aesthetic maybe, but I think I've always enjoyed that, very realistic, but with a sort of take the edge off a bit with a cartoony character in there, so it's not just so dry.
Well, how challenging was that 360-degree shot?
Oh, another good one to pull out. That was one of the more difficult. It's so tough because in the edit I think it's about 2 seconds maybe, and you've just got this time lapse going around the igloo. And one of the intentions of that shot is we're tracking the sun, and we see the sun it dips, but it never goes below the horizon. So I want to just maybe make sure another thing for the viewer to see, that the daylight here is 24 hours. We're not doing day night cycle. We're doing day. We're seeing the sun. So I knew at some point in the film I needed to show a full cycle of the sun, sort of high in the sky, going lower, but not quite dipping below the horizon, and then going back high. And then I thought, let me just show sort of a day in the life of him, and how simple his life is. He's sort of in his igloo, he goes out, fishes for a bit, then cooks for a little bit, and then goes back to the igloo. But time lapse for animation, I'm obviously not going to animate him for 24 hours and speed it up. I need to fake that look, so I'm just picking out little key frames and poses, and and trying to make that look like a time lapse when it's not. It's just that was one of the most challenging. I've even got a part of the shot, some clouds come in and some snow falls, and I've even got the snow will rise a little bit in that few frames when the snow falls. The snow level rises slightly, and then the sun comes back and the snow level goes down a little bit, just showing that So it's very, very technical, and it's difficult to pour so much time into shots like that are maybe about 2 seconds of an 11-minute film. But you have to just do what you have to do. You have to get it in there. I knew I wanted that shot, so.
It was an amazing shot, absolutely amazing. But what has been the reaction from the audiences that have seen the film?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been privileged and to just have honestly such a positive response so far from the film. I've been somewhat maybe sheltered in that it's only in the film festival circuit just now. It's not public online. It's not anywhere. It's not available yet to view to the average to the public. So maybe in that regard, I'm sort of skewed towards an audience already primed to enjoy a film. They've come to a festival. They're ready to enjoy something. Maybe for that reason, it's been very, very positive, and people seem to be very receptive of it, and so that's been lovely. And I suppose we'll see what the general audience thinks when it eventually goes online. But
well, with such incredible, stunning animation on a film like this, and when it's going through all of the film festivals, do animation studios come knocking on your door?
Studios maybe not so much. I get a lot more. I mean, there'll be a little bit of that, a little bit of maybe online people reaching out. A lot more filmmakers working on their own projects and want some help with their film, or need some advice on story, and much more on story side than maybe on that, some on animation, but much more on people writing their own short and they're not sure if their story is quite right or if it's possible to do this or that. And I think the main comment I get is that I did it on my own. That's what people focus on a lot, was how can they do that? How can they, can they make their film on their own, and they've got a story to think it's possible, and they'll send me some of their drafts. And there's definitely an influx of messages from other filmmakers, and if it's a studio, it'll be like a small indie team trying to make something that maybe some advice on. But
Yeah, I mean, what for you? How does it feel to be BAFTA longlisted?
this doesn't feel real. I really mean that in the sense that, like, I think because my path has been maybe a little bit unorthodox. I think of it as like, no one asked for this film. It wasn't funded by anyone. It was just me in my living room or my kitchen or my bed, wherever it was, on a laptop, just chipping away at this little idea I had and not thinking anything of it and just making it for me. And then I was planning on just putting it out there. And then I thought I'll do the festivals. And then it did really well at the festivals. And I was surprised at the reception it was getting. And then it's just every achievement every next little achievement, whether it was the very first like recognition, acceptance into a festival, was huge. I thought, oh, this is amazing. And then every step of the way, the big one, I won at the Shorts Festival in Tokyo. That was such a surreal moment, where I was on stage in Tokyo, like, what's going on? It really was like, what's happening? I was just by myself making this film, and now here I am in Tokyo. And then the BAFTA was just like, I'm sure everyone says this, but I genuinely just was not expecting anything close to like this level. And it's with BAFTA, even being in the same sentence as BAFTA, was incredible. So if nothing else comes of the film, I mean, this is more than I ever thought this little film would go. So yeah.
Well, was this film ever Oscar qualified? Because to me, it should have been.
It was Oscar, so it was Oscar qualified thanks to my Shorts Festival in Tokyo. That win qualified me for the Oscar, so I made the short list. I made the 113, is that long list, the Oscar long list? But then I haven't made the most recent short list that they've just released. So
you did not make the short list?
Did not make that short list. No,
what is wrong with these people?
That's why I said no. I'm just kidding.
No, yeah, in all seriousness, you know, I get the whole BAFTA thing. But the Oscars is a whole different animal, and this film should have been shortlisted. And
saying that,
and because I mean, I'll just say it here and now, because it's like this, ladies and gentlemen. I love films that are emotionally move me. Heartfelt, endearing, even in the midst of loss, love, and emotional perseverance, we're given a triumphant ending. Yes, just like Luke said, there's a little bit of tragedy in that ending, but I'll take the joy over tragedy any day. But it's not really an ending, but a continuance of love. And Solstice tells the story of a lonely Inuit man who must endure the endless summer daylight in the hope of being reunited with his lost love. Now, told entirely without dialogue, the film explores grief, isolation, devotion, and emotional perseverance through powerful imagery, with the Arctic landscape reflecting the inner world of its protagonist. Everything about this animated short film is stunning. It's awe-inspiring animation, perfect storytelling with the right metaphors and the juxtapositions that a film needs. Now, only 2 to 3 times a year do I ever use the word perfection when it comes to a film, and Solstice is absolute perfection in every way. And Luke, my, I literally sit on the edge of my seat waiting what you're going to do next.
Oh, thank you so much for this very high praise, and I really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much.
Well, I thank you for allowing me to see this film. It's one of my all-time favorite animated shorts, and I even was able to get my wife to sit down and watch it with me.
Nice.
She had the exact same
Did you
reaction.
like it?
She had tears in her eyes. I had tears in my eyes again. I mean, I've lost count how many times I've watched this film, and I have, I even had a friend of mine. I told him, I said, look, whenever you get to see this film, I said, you're going to need a tissue.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I promise I'm not a sad, I'm not a sad person either. I'm very cheery and very bubbly and upbeat, and I don't know why I tend to make these very sad films. So I promise my next one won't be as tragic and won't be as sad. And well, if it is sad, it'll have another happy ending at least. But
Well, I've seen quite a few animated short films, but I love the ones where there is a mixture of love and loss. There's just something
yeah.
that makes those films so endearing and so memorable. But
Mhm.
Solstice is literally at the top of my list. And for all of you Academy members out there, shame on you. Shame on you, and much praise to all of the BAFTA members that long listed this. And I pray that Solstice will be nominated come next Tuesday. So we'll see what happens with that. And I'll be sitting on the edge of my seat waiting just like you are, Luke. But again, thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah,
much for
that's right.
creating this film.
No, thank you so much for having me on this. This has been such a nice conversation. And again, I can only echo how much I appreciate all your lovely feedback. So thank you so much.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And we're going to shout this film from the rooftops and see what
Oh,
happens
thank you.
next week.
I
And
could use the help. I'm just little old me trying to promote this thing. So
there you go. There you go. And hey, and for all of you animators at Disney, you should be jealous of the work of this film. And I'm surprised you're not knocking Luke's door down to drag him through the doors of Imagineers to see what happens. But this is talent beyond anything I have seen in the areas of animation. But again, when Solstice is available to the public, this is a film you're going to have to absolutely watch. You're going to be like me. You're going to watch it over and over again because there's just little details that works so well. And when you create a film that's non-dialogue, you allows music to tell the emotional side of the story. You have an absolute winner, and Solstice is a winner in my book. And for all of you out there, you can watch or listen to all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel. You can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Audible, and more. And remember, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.